New York City, the concrete jungle where dreams are made, is rapidly becoming a nightmare for its most vulnerable residents. A silent, insidious crisis is escalating, fueled by a relentless enemy, water. Imagine this. Torrents of rain, the kind that turn bustling streets into raging rivers, submerge subway lines, and leave cars floating like forgotten toys. This isn't a scene from a disaster movie. It's the new reality for a city once synonymous with resilience. While we grapple with the immediate aftermath of flooded streets and suspended subways, a deeper, more insidious crisis is brewing beneath the surface. The alarming link between escalating floods and skyrocketing rates of homelessness. Prepare to be informed, engaged, and perhaps a little shocked as we unveil the alarming truth behind New York City's growing flood crisis and its devastating impact on homelessness. New York City's deepening crisis. When the heavens open, homes disappear. New York City, a global icon of ambition and opportunity, is increasingly finding itself on the front lines of a climate crisis with devastating local impacts. Recent events have starkly highlighted this vulnerability. The torrential downpours that recently deluged the city were not merely an inconvenience. They were a cataclysm, claiming at least 2 lives and bringing the metropolis to a standstill. Imagine this. Over 2 inches of rain cascading onto Central Park in the span of a single hour. This wasn't just a record-breaking downpour. It was the second wettest hour ever recorded in the city's history, a stark indicator of new, unsettling normal. The immediate aftermath was a scene of urban chaos. Multiple subway lines, the lifeblood of the city, were suspended, trapping commuters and disrupting the daily rhythm of millions. Cars, once symbols of freedom, became stranded relics on flooded thoroughfares, their occupants forced to abandon them or wade through knee-deep water. This wasn't just about delayed commutes or waterlogged shoes. It was a visceral experience of city overwhelmed, a powerful visual representation of its infrastructure buckling under the strain of an unprecedented meteorological assault. But the impact of these increasingly frequent and severe flooding events extends far beyond mere disruption. It's creating a domino effect, pushing an already fragile segment of the population closer to the precipice of destitution. The unseen victims, flooding's cruel hand on the homeless. The link between these escalating flood events and the growing homelessness crisis in NYC is not merely coincidental. It's a deeply intertwined tragedy. To understand the gravity of the situation, we must first confront the sobering reality of homelessness in the city before the floods even hit. Each night in New York City, an overwhelming 146,547 people find themselves without a permanent home. This isn't just a number. It represents a sprawling, invisible city within a city, populated by individuals and families grappling with unimaginable hardship. Breaking down this staggering figure reveals an even more poignant truth. 69% of these individuals are members of homeless families. And within these families, a truly shocking statistic emerges. 48,304 children are among the homeless population. Imagine the trauma, the instability, and the lost potential embedded in that single number. These are not just statistics. These are New York's children, navigating a world without the fundamental security of a safe and consistent home. The city's housing crisis, a long simmering boil, has now reached a fever pitch. Skyrocketing rents, a chronic shortage of genuinely affordable housing units, and a perpetually wavering economy have converged to create a perfect storm for housing insecurity. And then, another layer of complexity has been added, the arrival of tens of thousands of asylum seekers. While their plight is a humanitarian imperative, their presence further stretches the city's already fragile support system. Under the right to shelter mandate, a cornerstone of New York City's social contract, the city is legally obligated to provide housing for all homeless individuals, including these new arrivals. This humanitarian obligation, while absolutely essential and morally commendable, places immense, almost unbearable strain on existing resources, pushing the city to the brink of a housing capacity crisis. When floods displace even more people, this already strained system faces an existential threat. Can New York City survive the sea? The poverty paradox. The question, can New York City survive the sea, is no longer a rhetorical one. It's a pressing existential concern. But the sea here isn't just a literal ocean. It's also the rising tide of poverty that is inextricably linked to climate vulnerability. New York City, once a beacon of prosperity and limitless opportunity, now faces a deepening crisis of poverty that often goes unnoticed amidst its glittering skyscrapers. According to a sobering 2023 report by Robin Hood and Columbia University, nearly 23% of New Yorkers live below the poverty line. This figure is almost double the national average of approximately 11.5%. This staggering statistic translates to over 2 million residents struggling to afford basic necessities like food, shelter, and health care. Imagine the daily grind, the constant anxiety, and the difficult choices faced by such a vast segment of the population. The crisis is even more dire for children, with the child poverty rate reaching a shocking 25%, meaning 1 in 4 children in the city live in poverty. These statistics paint a troubling picture, highlighting that for a significant portion of its residents, the American dream is not just slipping, but has already slipped further out of reach. Those poor people are precisely the ones on the front lines of the homeless reality when floods hit. They're the most vulnerable, living in the oldest, least resilient housing, often in flood-prone areas. Their limited financial resources mean they have no buffer against displacement. When their already precarious homes are inundated, they have nowhere to go. They lack the savings for temporary accommodation, the connections for alternative housing, and often the legal literacy to navigate the complex system of aid and recovery. For example, a 2024 analysis by the NYC Comptroller's Office found that neighborhoods with the highest poverty rates were disproportionately affected by flood damage, experiencing 3.5 times more reported structural damage than affluent neighborhoods. This exacerbates existing inequalities, pushing more families into the desperate cycle of homelessness. The financial floodgates. Billions poured, but where does it go? It's natural to wonder, with all the talk of floods and the scale of the problem, where are the billions of dollars allocated for flood mitigation and infrastructure upgrades actually going? New York City has indeed invested significantly in coastal protection and flood resilience measures. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA, alone has allocated over $10 billion for post-Superstorm Sandy resilience projects, with a significant portion dedicated to hardening the subway system against future flooding. Other initiatives, like the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project, have committed billions more to build seawalls, elevate land, and improve drainage. However, the sheer scale of the challenge and the complex nature of urban infrastructure mean that progress is often slow and incremental. Critics argue that a significant portion of funds has been spent on reactive repairs rather than proactive, systemic overhauls. Furthermore, bureaucratic hurdles, contractor delays, and the rising cost of materials can significantly impact the efficiency of these investments. For instance, while some subway entrances have received flood barriers, thousands of miles of tunnels remain vulnerable. A 2023 report by the New York City Independent Budget Office estimated that even with current investment levels, it would take another 50 years to fully upgrade the city's aging water and sewer infrastructure to handle 21st century climate realities. This highlights a critical gap between investment and outcomes, leaving the most vulnerable populations at constant risk. A city underwater. The looming threat of climate migration. The escalating flood crisis is not just about isolated events. It's about a fundamental shift in New York City's environmental reality. The term climate migration typically refers to people moving away from climate-affected areas. But in NYC, we're seeing a perverse form of internal climate migration, where people are being displaced within the city itself due to uninhabitable conditions. Consider the data. A recent study by the First Street Foundation indicated that over 70% of properties in New York City have some level of flood risk, with projected increases in risk over the next 30 years. This translates to millions of residents living in homes that are increasingly vulnerable. Furthermore, between 2010 and 2023, the number of properties experiencing at least one flood event increased by 15% across the 5 boroughs, with projected 25% increase by 2050 under current climate trajectories. These are not abstract predictions. They are concrete realities that impact property values, insurance costs, and ultimately, the ability of residents, especially low-income ones, to remain in their homes. As climate change intensifies, the frequency and severity of extreme weather events will only grow. This means more intense rainfall, higher storm surges, and a relentless assault on the city's infrastructure and housing stock. For the city's homeless population and those teetering on the edge, this spells even greater precarity. Each flood event represents another blow, another reason to lose hope, and another barrier to finding stable housing. The cycle is vicious. Poverty makes people more vulnerable to floods, and floods exacerbate poverty and homelessness. Beyond the headlines, what can be done? The alarming link between New York City's growing flood crisis and its deepening homelessness problem demands urgent and comprehensive action. This isn't just an environmental issue or a social issue. It's a humanitarian crisis that requires a multifaceted approach. Firstly, there must be a significant acceleration and reprioritization of investment in resilient infrastructure. This means not just repairing what's broken, but fundamentally reimagining and rebuilding the city's defenses against water. This includes upgrading the subway system with robust floodgates and pumping stations, expanding permeable surfaces across the city to absorb stormwater, and investing in green infrastructure projects like rain gardens and wetlands that can naturally manage water runoff. For example, cities like Copenhagen have successfully implemented cloudburst management plans that create public spaces designed to temporarily store and divert large volumes of stormwater, turning a problem into an asset. New York could learn from these innovative approaches. Secondly, housing policy must explicitly integrate climate resilience. This means identifying and protecting existing affordable housing in flood-prone areas and ensuring that new affordable housing developments are built with the highest standards of flood resistance. It also means providing direct financial assistance and relocation support to residents displaced by flooding, with a focus on preventing them from falling into homelessness. A coordinated effort between housing authorities, emergency management agencies, and social services is crucial to streamline aid and ensure that vulnerable populations receive timely and effective support. This could involve creating a dedicated climate displacement fund to provide immediate financial relief and temporary housing to families impacted by flood events. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, addressing the root causes of poverty and housing insecurity is paramount. This includes expanding access to affordable housing, increasing minimum wages, providing robust social safety nets, and investing in job training and educational opportunities. A more economically resilient population is a more climate-resilient population. When people have stable incomes and affordable housing options, they are better equipped to withstand the shocks of climate events. Finally, public awareness and education are vital. New Yorkers need to understand the interconnectedness of these crises and the urgency of the situation. Community-led initiatives, participatory planning, and open dialogue can foster a sense of shared responsibility and empower residents to advocate for the changes needed to protect their city and its most vulnerable inhabitants. The future of New York City, its iconic skyline, and the millions of lives it holds, depends on our collective will confront this alarming link between floods and homelessness, and to build a truly resilient and equitable future. The time for action is now, before the rising waters claim even more homes and more hopes in the city that never sleeps.